There once was a toilet named Theodore. He was porcelain, slightly cracked near the base, and had served loyally for decades in room 214 of the Whispering Palms Motel, located somewhere between You Missed It and Too Far Back to Turn Around, on the map of Middle America. Theodore had heard it all. Groans, sighs, bubbles, farts like jazz solos, and even the occasional philosophical murmur from guests who believed the bathroom was the only place the universe truly listened. He bore it all in silence, as toilets do. But deep within his ceramic heart, Theodore longed for more. He dreamed of sunsets not seen through a bathroom window smeared with toothpaste mist. He dreamed of beaches, of warm sands under his U-shaped seat, of sipping coconut water through a flexible straw stuck into his flush lever. He dreamed of not hearing the words, "It's clogged again." Then one night, something changed. A traveling plumber checked into the room. He wore coveralls that smelled like mystery and a cologne called Pipe Burst. As he snored on the creaky motel bed, a strange glimmer danced from the wrench in his toolkit, bouncing off Theodore's tank lid and into the soul of his bowl. Theodore felt something, a tickle in his pipes, a gurgle of awakening. At 3:33 a.m., a time known only to raccoons, ghosts, and insomniacs with existential dread, Theodore made his move. He flexed, his bolts trembled, his water quivered. Then, with the suction of legend and a gentle pop, he broke free from the floor and began rolling. Yes, rolling. How, you ask? No one knows. Perhaps it was divine plumbing. Perhaps it was caffeine residue in the motel's sewer line. But somehow Theodore the toilet rolled, shuffling down the hallway past vending machines and mouldy carpets, out the automatic doors, which opened with a polite bing, and into the wild. He didn't know where he was going. He only knew he was going. The first few days were awkward. Strangers screamed, dogs barked, a child threw a frisbee into his bowl and called it a portal to the underworld. But Theodore was not discouraged. He kept rolling. He passed gas stations that only sold expired beef jerky, cornfields that whispered secrets in the wind, and diners with names like Bubba's Egg Lair. Sometimes birds sat on him. One tried to build a nest inside his tank. Theodore did not mind. He was free. He met a garden gnome named Charles who claimed he used to be a microwave. They became fast friends. Charles offered him a paper umbrella and told him about the ocean. "It's like a bath," he said, "but endless and salty and full of screaming birds." Theodore liked that. They hitchhiked together on the back of a retired circus elephant named Ralph, who now lived off tips from confused tourists. Ralph didn't speak, but he hummed show tunes through his trunk. The three of them made quite the sight: a toilet, a gnome, and a tired elephant heading west. One night, under a sky so full of stars it looked pixelated, Theodore felt something profound. He realized he hadn't been flushed in days. He didn't miss it. In fact, he felt lighter, less burdened, more than a toilet. He was a traveler, a seeker, a bidet in spirit. In a small town with only 2 traffic lights and a bakery that sold existential croissants, Theodore stopped at a bookstore. Not by choice, he accidentally crashed through the front window, but the owner, a man with 1 eyebrow and 3 cats, welcomed him anyway. "You look tired," said the man. "I haven't sat down in days," Theodore would have said, if he had a mouth. Instead, he just flushed softly. The man took that as agreement and let him rest in the poetry section. Charles the gnome read aloud from a book about cloud dreams, while Theodore filled his tank with melted snow scooped from the sidewalk. It was perfect. But perfection is boring. So they left, Onward they went, now joined by a toaster named Dolores, who believed she was a prophet. She would spit toast into the wind and shout prophecies like, "The jelly is coming," or "Beware the soggy pancake." Theodore didn't understand her, but that was okay. Understanding is overrated. They travelled through forests where trees whispered bedtime stories, over mountains shaped like tired old men, across rivers filled with forgotten socks. In one town, a cult tried to worship Theodore. They called him Porcelord. He politely declined and rolled away before they could anoint him with lavender bleach. He rolled across deserts where lizards wore tiny sunglasses, through cities where nobody looked up from their phones, not even to notice a toilet passing by. He rolled through parades, protests, pancake breakfasts. Sometimes people waved, sometimes they threw things. Once someone tried to sit on him. They are still stuck. He rolled on, and rolled, and rolled. He rolled into your town once, too. You probably didn't notice. Maybe you heard a soft flush outside your window around 2:47 a.m., followed by the whisper of wheels against pavement. That was him. Still travelling. Still dreaming. Where is Theodore now? Maybe he's by the beach, watching seagulls fight over a Cheeto. Maybe he's in a cave, telling riddles to bats. Maybe he's just behind you, gently humming elevator music in the key of drip. But one thing's for certain, he never stopped. Because vacations, true vacations, never really end. They just flush into something new. And Theodore the toilet with, "A soul is still rolling, still dreaming, still free forever and ever and flush." After departing from the cult of the Porcelord, who had tried to crown him with a toilet brush dipped in glitter glue, Theodore continued his journey westward, or eastward, or maybe it was slightly north-northwest. Directions had stopped mattering long ago. What mattered now was momentum. Theodore had started hearing things. Not in a worrying way, just the usual voices that come with being very, very free. The wind would whistle advice. Trees would tell bad jokes. Once, a tumbleweed rolled up beside him and whispered, "You ever wonder if we're all just debris?" Theodore didn't respond. He just flushed thoughtfully. In a tiny town known only to one raccoon and a Yelp review that got deleted for being too poetic, Theodore discovered a laundromat called Spin and Whisper. It was run by a sentient washing machine named Gladys, who only spoke in riddles. "Why do we rinse?" she murmured, "when the dirt always returns?" Theodore stayed for 3 days, sipping grey water and discussing fate with Gladys and her sidekick, a sarcastic dryer named Carl, who only communicated through lint sculptures. Carl was working on a life-size model of Neil deGrasse Tyson made entirely out of sock fuzz. It was magnificent and itchy. Theodore would have stayed longer, but he started feeling itchy himself. Figuratively, of course. His bowl longed for the road again, for the whoosh of a distant breeze through his tank, for the sound of dreams dripping gently into the plumbing of the cosmos. So he left. As he rolled out of Spin and Whisper, Carl handed him a single dryer sheet, folded like an origami. Swan. Theodore didn't understand its purpose, but he kept it anyway. One never knows when a magical fabric softener bird might come in handy. Weeks passed, or perhaps hours. Time began to wobble. Theodore entered a part of the country where everything was slightly odd. Trees grew sideways. Stop signs blinked in Morse code. Squirrels gave TED Talks. It was there he met Beverly. Beverly was a urinal. They locked eyes, or rather water inlets, and shared a moment that stretched longer than any sitcom laugh track. Beverly had been traveling too, but in reverse. She believed going backward was the new forward. They spent a week together in a roadside motel shaped like a pineapple, watching ceiling fans spin and naming each ceiling tile after minor historical figures. But alas, Theodore knew he couldn't stay. "You're a vacation," Beverly said, "but I'm a detour." It hurt. But he understood, and so he flushed goodbye and kept rolling, his ceramic heart a little heavier. He passed through valleys filled with antique VHS tapes of exercise routines, through towns where the streetlights spoke French and pigeons wore tiny monocles. In one cafe, he was mistaken for modern art and displayed under a spotlight while people sipped overpriced foam and debated his symbolism. "The bowl represents our collective hunger for release," someone said. "No," whispered another, stroking their chin. "It's clearly a metaphor for cyclical time." A baby just poked him and giggled. Theodore flushed modestly. At one point he rolled into a mountain shaped exactly like Nicolas Cage's left ear. No one knew why. No one questioned it. Inside the mountain was a monastery run by robotic goldfish in tiny robes. They taught Theodore the ancient art of silent flushing, a meditative practice involving stillness, emptiness, and thinking really hard about not thinking. He almost reached enlightenment, but then a seagull dropped a half-eaten corn dog into his bowl and ruined the moment, and so he rolled again. Eventually he found himself in a desert of forgotten grocery lists. Paper scraps danced across the dunes, scribbled with things like pickles, but not angry ones, and milk, the emotional kind. In the middle of it all was a lonely refrigerator named Eugene, who had been waiting for someone to open him for 70 years. "What's inside?" Theodore asked with a silent flush. "No one knows," Eugene replied. "Maybe cake, maybe disappointment, maybe a tiny opera." They opened him together. Inside was a single spoon and a note. "Keep going," it said, in spaghetti sauce handwriting. So Theodore did. Through the fog forest, where every leaf whispered memories you forgot on purpose. Through the upside-down drive-in theater that only showed dreams of people who fell asleep while watching cooking shows. Through a haunted parking garage run by polite ghosts who handed out complimentary coupons for nothing in particular. Everywhere he went, people whispered, "Was that a toilet?" and then promptly forgot what they were doing. He became legend. A myth. A whisper in plumbing forums. A sketch on a napkin in a diner run by raccoons in tiny aprons. And still he rolled on sometimes. He felt tired. Sometimes his bolts ached. Sometimes he wondered if he had already passed by paradise and just didn't notice. But each time he thought of stopping, he remembered the first time he saw a star reflected in a puddle. The first time a butterfly mistook him for a flower and rested on his seat. The first time someone smiled at him not because they needed him, but because they saw him, and so Theodore continues. Through strip malls lost in time, through playgrounds built for clouds, through space itself once, yes, briefly, thanks to a trampoline, a thunderstorm, and some quantum butter. He still rolls, maybe even now. Maybe you'll see him tomorrow, passing gently across your front lawn. At midnight, humming the theme song from an old sitcom only he remembers. Maybe you'll wake up with the faint scent of chlorine and the soft gurgle of destiny echoing through your walls. But don't be afraid. It's just Theodore, still on vacation, still dreaming, still flushing softly against the tide of time. Forever and ever and flush. After escaping the dimension of quantum butter, Theodore found himself gently spinning in the atmosphere above an amusement park shaped like a shoe. not metaphorically, literally a shoe. The entire park was nestled within a colossal leather boot, laced up with noodles and balanced precariously on a hill made of leftover mashed potatoes. Gravity, being curious, eventually pulled Theodore down. He landed softly in a bouncy castle shaped like Abraham Lincoln's beard. Children squealed in delight, thinking he was part of the attraction. One small child tried to ride him like a pony, another filled him with cotton candy. He didn't mind. It tickled, and besides, he had long ago given up trying to make sense of things. In the corner of the park stood a mysterious tent labeled Funnel Cakes and Existential Dread. Inside, an old fortune teller offered to read Theodore's plumbing. She stared into his bowl and gasped. "You are eternal?" she whispered, her voice echoing with ghostly reverb, and slightly clogged with symbolism. She offered him a prophecy written on a crumpled napkin. "You will find the ocean, but it will not be wet. You will find a friend, but they will not be born yet. You will flush, and the world will tremble." Theodore didn't know what it meant. He tucked it into his tank and rolled onward. As he exited the amusement shoe, a gust of wind shaped like a disappointed librarian carried him into a field of abandoned motivational posters. Each one sagged slightly, still trying to be brave. "You miss 100% of the naps you don't take." "Believe in yourself." "Even when you're cracked, you still hold soup." Theodore rolled past them, nodding respectfully. He soon came to a town made entirely of rubber ducks. The ducks ruled with surprising efficiency, wearing tiny golden crowns and holding city council meetings in bathtubs. Their queen, Quackarina the Benevolent, welcomed Theodore with a royal squeak and gifted him a bubble wand forged from ancient bathtub tiles. He stayed for a while, 3 weeks or maybe 3 decades, depending on how you measure duck time. He became their plumber general, solving disputes between leaky faucets and renegade shower curtains. But deep down, he knew he couldn't stay. The road whispered, the wind flushed, the stars blinked Morse code that only toilets can read. Keep going. So he did. And the world got weirder. He wandered into a place called the Middle of Maybe, where clocks ticked backward and pillows argued about philosophy. One pillow asked him, "If you flush in a forest and no one hears it, did you still serve your purpose?" He flushed in response, the universal sound of toilet contemplation. There, he met an umbrella named Daphne, who was terrified of rain. They became fast friends despite her constant shivering. She travelled beside him, shielding him from metaphorical storms and whispering bedtime lullabies about things that never happened, but could have. Together they visited a post office that only delivered feelings, a museum of unfinished thoughts, a diner where dreams were served on toast, a swamp where spoons conducted symphonies of frogs, a train station with no tracks, only hope. Everywhere they went, Theodore collected tiny pieces of wonder, a marble that sang lullabies, a shoe that told jokes, a mirror that only showed you as a chair. All these he kept in his tank, where the laws of physics grew bored and wandered off. Then one day, Theodore found himself at the edge of the world. Not metaphorically, a literal edge. A cliff where the sky peeled back and revealed a backstage area of the universe. There, he saw the cosmic janitor, a being made of mop handles, coffee stains, and forgotten Mondays. The janitor looked at Theodore and said, "You weren't supposed to leave the motel." Theodore flushed defiantly. The janitor sighed. "Well, since you're here, might as well see what's behind the curtain." and with a flick of a squeegee the universe turned inside out. Suddenly Theodore wasn't a toilet anymore. He was a planet, a dream, a mood, a soft hum between moments, but also still a toilet. Because identity is complicated, he floated gently through a dimension where reality was a suggestion and logic wore funny hats. Beings made of sentence fragments and loose change bowed to him. They called him Sir Bolalot, the seat of destiny. In this realm, his flush echoed across timelines. It rehydrated deserts, it silenced arguments, it watered the soul of a cactus who had never cried before. Time here was shaped like a pretzel, and Theodore rolled along it in endless loops. He had tea with Einstein's slippers. He got into an argument with a confused compass. He danced, yes, danced, with a constellation shaped like a sock puppet. And still he rolled. Because rest is nice, but the road is nicer. Because dreams get stale if you don't flush them now and then. Because somewhere out there, past the moons shaped like donuts and suns shaped like sleepy cats, there's always another motel, another faucet, another sigh in the dark waiting for the sound of a gentle flush. Theodore is still going. Maybe he's on your roof right now, quietly considering the stars. Maybe he's in your basement, humming lullabies into the pipes. Maybe he's hiding in your dream, whispering, "Vacation is forever." After the universe folded like a badly creased napkin, and Theodore had become, but also not become, a planetary idea in the shape of a porcelain seat, he began to explore not just places, but concepts. He rolled across the plain of forgotten notifications, a vast field where every "don't forget your password" and "we noticed a login from an unknown device" came to die. They floated in the air like dandelion fluff, whispering insecurely about two-factor authentication. A voice called out to him from a hill made entirely of melted snowmen. "The flush is not a release, it's a return." Theodore didn't know who said it. Maybe it was the wind, maybe it was the narrator of his own dream. Or maybe it was the goldfish oracle who lived in his tank and sometimes burped prophecies. Soon, Theodore found himself at the Department of Imaginary Roads, a bureaucratic building shaped like a comma, guarded by flamingos in trench coats. Inside, beings made of maps and U-turn signs shuffled papers around, all of which were blank, except for doodles of spirals and soup. One clerk leaned over to Theodore and said in a whisper, "Some roads don't go anywhere, they just enjoy being walked." And so Theodore walked them, or rolled them, or absorbed them into his ceramic soul. The lines blurred, the borders between motion and thought dissolved. One day, or maybe 100 years later, he stumbled into library, where books were written in smells and the librarians were jellyfish who rang tiny bells whenever someone blinked too loudly. He checked out a volume titled "The Emotional Temperature of Leftover Sandwiches" and another called "How to Speak Fern, Advanced Level." It was there he met Marvin, a lonely stapler with dreams of being a violin. Marvin played himself nightly to the tune of existential tax forms, and Theodore, touched by his music, cried a single tear. The tear crystallized and became a pearl of perfect misunderstanding. He wore it on his lid like a badge. In another world made entirely of opposites, Theodore woke up one day to find he had become a urinal cake. It was a strange time. People respected him, but only briefly. It taught him humility and also that people aim poorly when distracted. Eventually, he flushed himself free and emerged in a new realm, the kingdom of infinite waiting rooms. Here, every chair was slightly too uncomfortable. Every clock ticked, but never moved. The magazines were all titled Yesterday's News Next Week and featured cover stories like How to Wait More Efficiently While Internally Screaming, The Science of Saying Soon and Meaning Nothing, 7 Exercises You can do with just your anxious thoughts. He waited. For what, he wasn't sure. But one day, a nurse made of vapor and hangnails called out, "Mr. Theodore, the universe will see you now." He entered the door and emerged in a realm of pure silence, where time was replaced by soup and gravity was dictated by musical notes. He floated there, listening to the sound of noodles swirling around his lid. Occasionally, a saxophone passed by, apologizing for being late. This place was called Elsewhere. In Elsewhere, he encountered a group of sentient umbrellas conducting a protest. They held signs like, "We are not just rain tools. Let us open emotionally. Down with folding oppression." Theodore flushed in solidarity. A nearby cloud wept a rainbow out of confusion. He stayed long enough to teach a class at the University of Slight Regrets, where he led a seminar titled The Ethics of Bathroom Graffiti. His students, a mix of sentient backpacks and abstract emotions, gave him standing ovations by blinking slowly and murmuring things like, "Whoa." Later, he was offered a throne in the city of Maybe, where everyone was mayor and no one paid taxes because the currency was indecision. He declined, politely citing a full tank and an overflowing soul. Instead, he wandered again, through a forest where each tree sang a lullaby that only raccoons could understand. A desert made of undone shoelaces. A subway where the train only traveled through memories you haven't made yet. He began to feel different. Not tired, no, never tired, but expanded. He could hear the thoughts of traffic cones. He could taste sarcasm. He could speak in fonts. Eventually, he reached the edge of again, a place where all things begin once more. A staircase spiraled upwards forever, but there were no steps, only ideas. A sign read, "Up is down, left is spaghetti. All who enter must flush first." And he did. A flush so mighty, so gentle, so inevitable that it echoed backward through his journey, through every motel, every parking lot, every tiny soap bar he'd encountered. The echo traveled into your dreams, into this story. Yes, this very story. Because Theodore isn't just a toilet on vacation. He is the idea of vacation itself. He is rest. He is wandering. He is the thing in your home that doesn't ask anything of you except the simple act of letting go, and he's still out there, rolling through dimensions made of forgotten jokes, sailing across oceans of abandoned to-do lists, floating above cities where everyone dreams of being something else. Theodore has no destination, only direction. He will never stop, because the journey is the flush. After flushing reality into a delicate spiral of philosophical gurgles, Theodore found himself orbiting a moon made entirely of unsent emails. The sky above him blinked like a forgotten cursor. Every crater whispered messages like, "Just checking in, per my last flush." Let me circle back on that. He floated gently over them, propelled by winds made of sighs and the faint aroma of burnt toast. This place was called Inbox Tinction, where conversations came to be nearly sent, but never arrived. There he met a being shaped like a paperclip, wearing sunglasses and humming quietly to itself. The paperclip introduced itself as Clippy the Redeemed, a former assistant turned cosmic wanderer. "You look like you're trying to forget," said Clippy. Need help escaping the metaphor of work-life balance? Theodore, solemn and porcelain, flushed once, a deep, soulful flush that echoed through every unread message on earth. Together, they folded themselves into a paper airplane of destiny and launched toward the next dream realm, Snack Riffis Valley. In Snack Riffis Valley, all meals came with moral consequences. The chocolate chip cookie, it remembered everything you forgot to do. The sandwich, it told you how sandwiches felt when eaten. The soup, it only whispered secrets it had no right to know. Theodore ordered a cup of existential broth and watched as his reflection blinked first. Then came the town of Sylvania, where everything was slightly too boring in just the right way. Here, clouds made polite conversation. Mailboxes snored gently. The grass dreamed of being office carpeting. Theodore fit right in. He was celebrated as the ambassador of naps, given a crown made of crumpled receipts and a throne shaped like a recliner that judged no one. But even in this paradise of pleasant nothingness, the road called. The journey continued. He passed through the Museum of Misplaced Keys, where every door led nowhere in particular. He tiptoed through a conference for extinct serial mascots. He was briefly interviewed on a podcast hosted by 3 existential owls who asked questions like, if toilets dream, do they dream of waterfalls or deserts? Have you ever truly emptied your tank emotionally? What is the sound of one flush flushing? Eventually, Theodore began to feel heavier. Not in mass, but in meaning. He had become a symbol in some cultures. In one realm, children left offerings of tiny soaps and hotel mints at statues made in his image. In another, poets wrote odes with lines like, "O flush-bringer, porcelain king, you take what we give and ask not a thing." He was worshipped in the Church of the Gurgling Hope, where sermons were whispered over the hum of bathroom fans, and baptisms involved very polite plungers. But he didn't seek worship. He sought the edge of himself. And so he rolled on, past cities made of jazz, past forests made of old desktop icons, through the waffle-iron asteroid belt, where every asteroid was hot and grid-patterned and covered in syrupy regret. He encountered an elderly television with a dial for a soul. He played chess against a fox made of fog. He rode a comet powered by lost dreams and mint gum wrappers. Everywhere he went, people whispered his name, or at least flushed in his honor. Then came a place where even names dissolved, the field of unwritten goodbyes. Here, every breeze was a farewell that had never been spoken. The air tasted like the silence between 2 people who almost said what they meant. And Theodore, who had never truly said goodbye to anything, finally paused. He gazed into a mirror made of unspoken apologies and saw every version of himself. The motel toilet that once dreamed of the sea, the friend of a stapler with music in its springs, the rolling philosopher in a world made of nonsense, the god, the fool, the nap. But instead of speaking, he flushed, and the mirror cracked beautifully. The crack sang. The world tilted slightly to the left and then gently corrected itself. Somewhere, 1,000 toothbrushes spontaneously tap-danced. Somewhere else, a cheese grater made peace with its past. And Theodore? He kept going because he had no home, because home was every place he'd ever flushed, because sleep isn't an ending, it's just the next road. He now rides a highway made of lullabies, stretching between forgotten dreams and breakfasts that never happened. You might see him in your sleep tonight, rolling slowly past your thoughts, humming a little song only toilets can hum. He might whisper a bedtime message to you. Let it go. Flush the worry. Sleep is the vacation of the soul. and as you drift off, somewhere very far away, a quiet sound echoes. Flush. Somewhere between the spaghetti nebula and the chronological pancake rift, Theodore began to leak. Not water, but ideas. They bubbled out of his ceramic frame like foam thoughts. What if socks had union meetings? Do shadows remember the light? Is déjà vu just a software update for souls? He didn't panic. He simply tightened his metaphorical bolts and continued gliding through the interdimensional carpet aisle, where each rug was a portal to another absurd reality. He paused on a paisley rug labeled Tuesday Feelings, stepped onto it by existing near it very hard, and fell instantly into a Tuesday that had never ended. It was always, almost, lunchtime. The sun kept stalling at that weird angle that makes everything feel vaguely orange. Office printers groaned in the distance. People stood in elevators, staring at nothing. Theodore wandered through a building with too many floors and not enough ceilings, past vending machines offering reheated hope diet. Guilt nuggets, spicy, just one cookie, but it cries afterwards. He tried the third. It was delicious and devastating. Later, he found a janitor closet that was larger on the inside, naturally. Inside, a miniature planet inhabited by dust bunnies, all of whom wore tiny cowboy hats and spoke in reverse French. One of them, named Gustavo Le Filtre, offered Theodore a job as deputy of forgotten chores. Theodore politely declined, citing a flush-based spiritual journey currently underway, and promised to send a postcard. And so the vacuum pulled him on. Not a literal vacuum, though he had met one once that recited limericks, but a narrative vacuum, the kind that swallows all plot and leaves only poetry behind. He passed a cafe made entirely of sighs. He stayed briefly at a hotel that only existed between yawns. He attended a lecture from a sock puppet philosopher who declared, "The universe is a nap in disguise, and you, porcelain wanderer, are its lullaby." And Theodore flushed in appreciation. The flush was now more than just water and physics. It was a ritual, a punctuation mark at the end of strange sentences, a song with no melody, a belief system built entirely on letting go. Theodore began to glow softly. He no longer rolled. He hovered, humming faintly, wrapped in the robes of forgotten bathtubs and ancient loofahs. Around his lid swirled the constellation of Clean, a ring of stars shaped like shampoo bottles, each one whispering affirmations like, "You are more than mildew. You contain multitudes, and flush them gracefully. This too shall swirl away." One night, or perhaps one sideways blink of a god's daydream, Theodore floated into the realm of chrono-foam, a time place where clocks melted into poodles, and calendars were emotionally distant. Here time didn't pass, it sauntered. He watched entire lifetimes bloom and wilt inside of soap bubbles. He sipped, lukewarm, eternity from a teacup shaped like a regret. He danced with a fax machine that only transmitted dreams. He stayed for as long as it took not to notice time at all. Then he flushed again. It was always the way forward. This time the flush pulled him through a vortex of sticky notes and grandmotherly advice. He landed in the Hall of Things You Meant to Do, where every corridor was lined with intentions like, learn the guitar, apologize to Kevin, start journaling for real this time. He wandered them slowly, each step echoing with the soft guilt of good intentions left behind. But instead of sadness, Theodore felt something gentler. Permission. Permission to forget. Permission to nap instead. Permission to flush the pressure. He flushed. The halls dimmed softly, respectfully, like a world bowing to a ceramic monk. Then came a new plane, the pillow verse. It was all softness, all hush. Every surface was a nap. Clouds tucked him in. The stars whispered lullabies in Morse code made of marshmallows. A choir of dust motes sang somewhere over the bedspread, in keys, yet undiscovered, and yet Theodore did not stop. He could not. He was no longer just a vacationing toilet. He was the spirit of letting go, the patron saint of pointless rest, the god of dreams where nothing makes sense, and that's okay. Some say he now lives in the space between blinks. Others say they've heard the soft echo of his flush in moments of deep peace, like when you wake up on a Saturday and realize you don't have anywhere to be. He may visit you tonight. He may gently hover near your pillow, radiating mild indifference and sleepy joy. And as you drift off, you might hear it, so soft, so distant. Flush, 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 and on he travels. Shall I continue the never-ending dream? There's always another flush,